In our first video in this series, we contended that Paul did some of his best work from lockdown, and we noticed that there are some things we can learn from him as we try to help people follow Jesus, even in isolation. In our second video, we saw that the center of Christian spiritual formation is encountering Jesus, encountering you. And so we looked at some ways to help people encounter Jesus, encountering them, because that's how people actually change. So today we're going to look at where to go from there. We're going to see what Paul did once he had gotten people to Jesus. Where did he go next? In 1 Corinthians 13, there's this interesting phrase: faith, hope, and love. Abide these three, and the greatest of these is love. Faith, hope, and love. In his letter to Thessalonica, Paul also made a big deal out of faith, hope, and love. This is interesting because he had spent a lot of time in Corinth, and he explicitly referred to faith, hope, and love as though it was something that he had very carefully taught them while he was with them. He was reminding them of what he hoped they already knew. Paul was able to spend very little time in Thessalonica and actually had a considerable anxiety about whether or not that church was going to last, because he had to leave so quickly after making the first disciples there. But just like he did with the Corinthians, whom he'd stayed with a long time, Paul explicitly and purposefully underscores faith, hope, and love as the outcome of his efforts. Now, to be clear, it isn't just arbitrary hope, things are going to be okay. And it isn't faith, like believe something. And it isn't love, like let's be cool with each other. It's faith, hope, and love explicitly rooted in Jesus. We see this at the end of the first letter to Corinth. They've asked Paul a question about the resurrection. Is the resurrection a metaphor, or are we actually expecting a bodily resurrection one day? This is what Paul does. This is the format. Paul makes a straight line to the gospel narrative, the narrative of the life and death and bodily resurrection and ascension of Jesus. And then from there, nurtures a vivid hope for their future. This is continually Paul's pattern. When Paul encounters a question or a problem or a need or an opportunity in his audience, he will take that, run straight at Jesus, find something in the story of Jesus that speaks to that or that connects with that, and then he will explicitly run toward faith, hope, or love. In the case in 1 Corinthians, they're unsure about bodily resurrection, and so Paul says, well, Jesus rose bodily. Therefore, you can expect to rise bodily. Anyone who says different is abandoning the gospel. This format is exceedingly simple, and I find in times like these where I don't always know what to do, and my cognitive abilities are a little muted by the amount of stress and trauma and bad news, simply having a plan really boosts my confidence, and it increases the peace with which I approach someone I'm trying to mentor, disciple, or help. If I can identify what they want and encourage them to take that to Jesus, out of the conversation will emerge an anxiety, a problem, a fear, a question. If I can take that question to the gospel narrative, the life, teachings, death, resurrection, ascension, and promised return of Jesus, I am then in a position where I can ask the question, how does this nurture faith, hope, or love? Or maybe a combination of those. Before we get into specific pathways for nurturing faith or for nurturing love or for nurturing hope that are relevant to lockdown or quarantine, let me just encourage you to take this roadmap to your next difficult conversation. When you are attempting to help someone and you find yourself at a loss, or when you are attempting to help someone and you find yourself tempted to try to get them to read a million things or to watch a million things, how can you simplify the conversation to, I hear what you want, I hear your question. Let's go to Jesus, and how can we find our way from Jesus to faith, hope, and love? These are the cardinal virtues. These are the expression of the life of Jesus in a human being. These, not dynamic biblical literacy, not supernatural events. Those things are important and they will follow. But the character of a Jesus follower is soaked in faith, hope, and love that we get from Jesus. So how can you nurture just those three things? Please leave a comment below with questions about how to do this or examples of when this worked for you.